And what's happening, everybody? On today's show, our buddy Chris Marler going to join us for a state of the SEC through the first 5 weeks. We'll also preview all the matchups for SEC Week 6. Could Alabama and Georgia be on upset alert this week? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Let's jump into it. He joins us every Wednesday. He's our buddy Chris Marler on Twitter at Vern Funquist with no E in there. Marler, how are you through the first 5 weeks of the SEC season?
I'm better than you. I know that. Not like career-wise or successful or anything like that, or just emotional stability and happiness. But everything else, football-wise, tough weekend. But no, I'm good, man. It was a fun – you know what I really liked about the season so far is that, knock on wood, we've had the first couple of weeks, like last week, like didn't have as many marquee games as week 4? Yeah. But there's a lot of depth to it. Like there's a lot of good games. And for the most part, all the games have kind of lived up to their billing, right? Besides Oregon and Colorado, I feel like there's been like a bunch of really good games. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm excited for getting into October when stuff starts to matter more.
Well, we got to start here, Marler, because there was a quote from Kirby Smart yesterday evening that came out, I believe On 3 Sports had it. And it said, Kirby Smart was asked at his press conference about the SEC as a whole, particularly some programs making noise after being down. And Kirby said this, and this is after their tough battle against Auburn this past week. He said, quote, "I personally think every SEC team should be ranked. I can guarantee you there are some teams that don't want to that don't want to play them that are ranked. I mean, I literally have no idea what you're referencing because every team we play in the SEC is good enough to beat us, and whether they're ranked or not, I could care less." That's an exact quote. That's why I stumbled over it. But do you agree with Kirby?
No.
Every
SEC
should be ranked?
That is like, okay, so here's one of two things is happening. One, he's carrying the water and going to bat for the SEC or whatever. And that's fine, right? What I think is happening, and number two on this list of possibilities, which is, again, what I think is happening, is Kirby knows that what he has right now is not what he's had in the last 2 years. And I think he's got to find ways to motivate his team and also kind of like do a little bit of PR damage almost, like all that talk about it's tough to win on the road. It's tough to win on the road. Yeah, I know, man. That's kind of why fans have been talking nonstop about how difficult it would be for you to go out to College Station. Like, and the fact that you guys haven't had to do that yet somehow in year 11 or 12 of them being in the conference. Like, it is hard to win on the road. It is hard to win on the road. But I also realize that with your schedule this year, there's no room for error. Like, there's no room for error in the way that Georgia has played their first 5 games of the season. There's really no room for error for them if they lose, even at like. Honestly, even if they lose in the SEC championship game to a one-loss team, I don't know if the committee's going to put them in because they haven't really, at least in September, won convincingly against any good teams, and they've struggled at times, especially early on in every game they played. Let's face it, I mean, like, listen, that Auburn team needed like 4 or 5 turnovers to beat a bad Cal team by 4 points, and you're in a dogfight with them until the last 3 minutes of that game. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's funny. Back to the Kirby quote. It reminds me there was Josh Pastner when he was the college basketball coach in Memphis years ago. He had a quote at a press conference where he said, "Everybody's good. Everybody's good." And I feel like that sometimes what these coaches feel like this about the SEC. And it's funny because we hear it sometimes on a Monday, like Billy Napier playing Vanderbilt this week. He's got to get up there and go, "Guys, we got a big challenge on our hands this week." You're like, it's Vandy, dude. Like, relax. Yeah. Now, for Florida, they lost to them last year, so maybe that is a little bit real. But it's just funny whenever, like when Kirby has to do that and get up there, when he had these juggernaut Georgia teams, and he goes, got to prepare for a really good – I mean, this Vanderbilt team, they're really good. And it's like, come on, man. We know, like –
Well, and I understand, like, this is an SEC podcast. I work for an SEC website. Like, we primarily dabble in just like with the SEC. And so I fully understand all of that. But I also love to be objective and like try to be as like rational and logical as possible. And like there is a lot of SEC bias. I mean, there is. Like there's only one 2-loss team that's ranked in the entire country right now. It comes from the SEC, right? Like I remember going into last year, it was like the highest 1-loss, the highest 2-loss, the highest 3-loss team in the country where they were ranked late in the last season, all from the SEC. Like the SEC gets the benefit of the doubt a lot. And I guess
it's justified though, right? I mean, with all the championships, I mean, it's
but
earned.
Okay. But like you look at right now, like no offense to LSU, I think LSU is a top 25 team. But if we're talking about like it being based off of like your schedule and where like it be merit based, like Maryland's is unranked. They're 5-0. Like you just snuck Mizzou in there. Like and like I think that there's a little bit more of a bias this year that I do think is warranted because of the past seasons. But if we're being honest about what we've seen on the field this year, yeah, the SEC is not the best conference in the country right now in college football. Now,
I meant to, on that note, Tim Brando made some headlines this week because he brought up. He said he thinks it's absolutely ridiculous Georgia's still the number 1 team, and it is kind of funny because there is an argument. Should we go based off what we've seen, the record, merit? Are we going to reward you for a tough loss? Like, here's the thing: LSU, as much as you want to crap on them, they scored 49 points. Like if their defense gets a stop at the end, they have one less loss, right? So I mean, like you do have to take that into account. And yes, Georgia is undefeated. And when you start preseason number 1, you kind of get the benefit of the doubt. But like, shouldn't voters and pollers be willing to slide a team down if it wasn't a hugely convincing win?
If it was Florida State and they looked like this so far, do you think that they would have slid down? If it's Texas, do you think they would have slid down? Like, no, like that part for me is like very frustrating because I get both sides of it. I even said on our podcast, I'm like, listen, like in the first several weeks of the year, I was like, Georgia's the back-to-back defending national championship. They have earned the right to be ranked number 1. But now we've had a full month of the season, right? And like part of me wants to look at it and be like, yeah, well, they deserve to be number 1 until they get knocked off. But they don't this year. Because here's another thing too. It's not like we're looking at a bunch of teams and all the teams are like average, right? Like I keep hearing this nonstop. Well, there's not any elite teams. No one's great this year. Well, it's the first month of the season. Nobody's a finished product. And then 2, like there's a lot of really, really good teams like Washington, Oregon, like, Penn State, we don't talk enough about. Like I hear all the time, like Ohio State, like how are they a top 5 team? Ohio State went on the road and beat Notre Dame. Everyone else around where Georgia is ranked, besides maybe Nebraska, I'm sorry, not Nebraska, Michigan, who just beat Nebraska, like they all have at least one win on their schedule that seems like it should be like that their rank is warranted, except for the top 2 teams. And it's so weird to me that like those 2 haven't budged. And like, I think Texas right now is it should be ranked number 1. Florida State's got 2 big wins away from home. I don't get it. Like I don't see how. I feel like if it was any other team, they would have already slid out of the number 1 spot. But since it's Georgia and they're from the SEC, but this isn't 2022 Georgia. It's not 2021 Georgia. Like I don't understand it.
All right, I'm going to hit you with a few rapid fire questions before we move ahead and get into the week 6. But I'll give you just a quick hitter. You just give me a quick 10, 20-second answer on what you think. Who's the best team in the SEC right now?
Right now, probably Georgia.
Right?
I mean, probably. Like, it's them or A&M or Bama.
And we'll find that out this weekend. We'll get to that game in a little bit. Bye weeks for 3 teams. Just give me a quick thought on each one through the first 5 weeks. Quick thought on Auburn.
Better in some places, and like gives you a reason to believe a little bit, especially with the way that schedule in the back half is. The biggest surprise to me is that a lot of their issues aren't just passing; it's in-game management from Hugh Freeze, things that you would not consider to be an issue in the past, and the passing game. Like that's his whole thing, right? He's a QB whisperer, QB guru, and like all the issues they've had really have you can kind of blame on coaching.
Yeah, it's so weird. You would think, if anything, a Hugh Freeze team is going to throw the ball well. South Carolina through the first 5 weeks.
Back to reality is probably the best way to put it. I mean, like, listen, I think we all love Shane Beamer. They are a fun team to watch. Spencer Rattler's been awesome so far. Would love to see them fully healthy. They were never going to beat Tennessee. I was surprised that they lost that bad to UNC. So 2-3 is not something that would have been that unexpected going into September. I honestly, I thought best case, worst case scenario was going to be 2-3 or 3-2. And so you're not far off from that. I wonder what the fan base is going to be sounding like as the season goes on. Because it's not like that schedule gets that super easy after this.
Yeah, they're 2-3. They get Jacksonville State in a couple weeks. That's a third win. But can you find me 3 other wins? Florida, at Mizzou, at A&M, Vandy, probably. But then you finish with Kentucky and Clemson. Like 3 wins is not a lock. 6-6 is not a lock for South Carolina.
Agreed.
That's crazy. The other team that's on a bye week this week, just your assessment through the first 5 weeks on Tennessee.
Really impressed with how they rebounded last week. And I say rebounded because I know they had a game in between the Florida game and South Carolina, but really impressed with the focus they had. And I will say this, I'm not surprised at the struggles that Joe Milton has had at quarterback, but the rest of the conference better be nervous that he doesn't get it figured out. And the Brew McCoy injury sucks. I hate that for him. Yeah. Great kid. Seems like he's really found a home finally in Knoxville. But the rest of the conference better pray that Milton doesn't figure it out, because if they get that part of the offense going, everyone's in trouble.
The other thing I wanted to hit on just real quick in this segment, just kind of talking like coaches on the hot seat. Would we put Sam Pittman and Billy Napier on there right now?
I mean, it would have to continue to get worse. Like this thing would have to keep trending. I hate to say it, but how it's trending now. Like if Florida loses to Vandy this week, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. That was not a good look at what happened against Kentucky. But also, Kentucky's a better football team than Florida. Like, they probably should have never been favored in that game, or even less than a 2-point spread in that game. You got to for Florida, they have to win the games, and Arkansas really. You got to win the games that you're supposed to win on the rest of the schedule. I don't even think you need, if you're either one of those coaches, a extra surprise win for the fan base to still like you, because you have enough built up there for Pittman. And then also Napier got that big win against Tennessee already.
Ironically, one of the coaches that came into the year on the hot seat, Jimbo Fisher, might be cooling. We'll see what happens this week against Alabama. We will get into the SEC Week 6 slate with Chris Marler here in just a second. More Locked on SEC right after this. First, I want to remind you guys this episode is presented to you by our friends over at Bird Dogs. Like, Bird Dogs is doing their part to make you guys look good. They feature those stretch khaki shorts that are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and the leg to give you that sculpted look. Their shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. Let's be real. Some cooler temps coming across the SEC over these next couple of weeks, but Bird Dogs got you covered, man. They're not just shorts. They got pants, the stretchy fabric to move around, feel comfortable, and they fit any occasion, whether you're playing golf, out on a date, an evening out, hanging out by the pool, workout, lounging, work, whatever it is. Bird Dogs is going to make you look good and feel good. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege. Enter our promo code LockedOnCollege at checkout. That will get you a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. It's a nice water bottle. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege for that free water bottle at checkout. We promise you will not want to take your Bird Dogs off. They'll make you look good, feel good, and you'll be in style at the SEC tailgate over the next couple weeks. birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege. And we continue on with our buddy Chris Marler from the college football. What is your podcast again? The Saturday Football Uncensored podcast.
Yeah.
I mess it up every time. Well, if you weren't rebranding every month, I could hit it right. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not the one that made that decision, so.
Saturday Football Uncensored is the podcast. Marler,
you know what you want to do in year 3 of a podcast that you haven't supported or posted it on your website ever anyway, is change the name of it so it's even harder to find. Thanks a lot, SDS.
Chris Marler and Tyler Huck, they do an awesome job. All right, Marler, I want to jump into it with some of the games happening this weekend. And we'll start and obviously this game isn't going to be one anybody's going to be watching, but 11 a.m. Central on the SEC Network. It's 2-3 Mississippi State against 2-3 Western Michigan. It's a weird game, but Mississippi State's about a 20-point favorite. It's a get-right game for them after a 3-game slide.
Yeah.
But, man, you saw them play Alabama this past week. What a weird team that just doesn't have an identity.
That's perfect word. Perfect word. And I know I said it on our podcast, the Saturday Football Uncensored podcast.
Yeah.
And I think I said it on here too. And one of the things I was most impressed about after that week 2 win against Arizona, and Arizona sucks, right? So it's like it's not a huge win. There was a double overtime win. You probably should have like beat them by more or whatever. But one of the things that did impress me with it was that like the commitment they had to running the football and their offensive identity under Zach Arnett, which was like, like you have Will Rogers there, so you're not going to probably like if the game gets dicey, you have the career leading passer like all time in your program in your back pocket, like throw the football. And they didn't do that. And I remember praising Zach Arnett for it because it's like early on in his coaching career, that's at least a bold move to put your foot down and be like, this is who we're going to be. Now, 3 games later, I have no clue who they're trying to be. Like South Carolina, they had 487 yards passing this past week. They ran the ball. Mike Wright was more involved in the red zone. It seemed to be pretty successful, to be honest. Like I don't know what they're trying to do consistently. I will say against Bama, they were a little bit nicked up. Jaquavius Marks was injured. Even when he came in, he still had a couple big runs, but like, I mean, this was always going to be a difficult year for them. I'm a little bit surprised. I would like to see Will Rogers come off on a better note. How about that?
Yeah, and look, they'll win. They'll win this one against Western Michigan. That'll get them to 3-3. They do still play Southern Miss later in the year. That'll get them to 4 wins. But can you find 2 SEC wins? Keep in mind they're winless in the SEC. They have road trips at Arkansas, at Auburn, home for Kentucky, at A&M, and then of course the Egg Bowl, which looking right now, I don't know if they'll beat Ole Miss. So, man, 2 wins. It says 2 wins, but okay, maybe Arkansas and Auburn they have a chance, but you got to kind of almost win one of those to get to 6 wins to get bowl eligibility. So Zach Arnett kind of going through it this year. All right, at 4 p.m. Eastern on the SEC Network, it's 2-4 Vandy at 3-2 Florida. Did you see the line on this game?
No.
And I know Vandy's going through it right now, and AJ Swan's been banged up. They had to turn to Ken Seals. Defense wasn't great, but Florida.
Ken Seals just sounds like a mustache that came to life. Like that name is just
he's a friend on the pod. We had him on 2 years ago on the show. But Florida is a 28.5 point favorite against Vanderbilt. This is a game Florida lost a year ago with Anthony Richardson.
Has Florida beaten anybody 28 besides themselves?
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, they won Tennessee. It was convincing, but it wasn't by 28.5.
Vegas is so messed up, man. That is like if a recovering addict was like, no, I'm getting clean, and you're like, no, just have a little taste here. Vandy plus 28.5, like I'll dabble. Like that's a crazy line. Like that is a crazy line. I don't know. I mean, I'd take Florida to win. You rarely get a chance to have a revenge game against Vandy. Nobody wants to have a revenge game against Vandy in this sport. I like Florida to rebound, you would think. And they did that. They did a really good job of that earlier in the season after the Utah game and kind of rallying the troops. Of course, they got an extra week to do that against Tennessee. This is an important game. Like this is an important game for Napier because like I said like a minute ago, I think that he is going to be able to like evade the hot seat talk. It's only year 2 and you got that big win under your belt. But if you lose this game, I mean, the stove just gets turned right back up.
What's crazy is I'm looking at poor Clark Lee, right? He's going to lose this game. They're going to fall to 2-5. So the 2 SEC wins they actually got last year. Kentucky avenged their loss. Florida will avenge their loss this week. And then next week, Vandy's got to host Georgia. Like, first off, to play 8 straight games out of the gate, you played week 0. You don't even have a break yet. And we got 3 teams in the SEC that played 5 games and they all got their bye already this week.
Yeah.
Vandy, who made that schedule, bro? Like 8 straight weeks without a bye?
I mean, that's what Bama and LSU are doing.
That's true.
Every year. Like every year they do that. But it's Vandy. So Vandy, I've always said this. Vandy should get in a minimum 2 buys. Like Vandy should get a minimum 2 buys. Yeah, they should also, like, if we're being honest, like bring Cutler back. Like let them have an all-time quarterback. Make it fun. We're already changing every other rule in college football.
How about this schedule, though? Later in the season, they'll play Auburn. They'll play at South Carolina. They get a bye in the second to last week, and then they finish at Tennessee. Like, what?
Yeah. Honestly, though, they get Auburn at home, right?
Yeah. That might be the one.
That might be the one. And also, do you know that the all-time series record is?
I don't.
It's tied.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. So it's, I mean,
well,
history is somehow on Vandy's side.
I do want to touch on two more games here real quick. 6:30 Eastern on the SEC Network. It is 2-3 Arkansas at number 16 Ole Miss. Ole Miss an 11.5-point home favorite. Ole Miss could do no wrong last week against LSU. I mean, the hangover concern about the loss to Alabama and Tuscaloosa, Ole Miss came back home to Vaught Hemingway, and it was rocking. And look, the defense isn't good, obviously, but the offense is really, really good. And bounce back game for Quinshon Judkins. Man, Arkansas is really going through. They couldn't even put up a fight against A&M a week ago.
Yeah, Arkansas is not good, and they got Rocket Sanders back for that game, which is tough. I remember saying that the perfect setup for A&M in that game was like a get right game for that defensive line against a really, really bad Arkansas offensive line, and it played out exactly to that. And I think A&M is still really a good team, and they're a long way from their completed selves. It's just, like I know they lost to Miami, but I think they are a much better team than that. They had 15 tackles for loss against Arkansas. They scored in every phase of the game. I mean, you got beat in every possible way to look at it. There wasn't a lot of, there just weren't a lot of positives. And I think what concerned me more than anything for Arkansas is like the looks on KJ Jefferson's face. And just like his overall body language, like KJ Jefferson is a absolute warrior. Love how hard of a competitor he is and all that kind of stuff. But he seems like he's fed up, man. He can't do it all on his own. And I've never seen a quarterback of that size constantly be lined up in shotgun on 3rd and 4th and short. Makes no sense to me.
Yeah, and I think both Rocket Sanders and KJ Jefferson are saying, really, Dan Enos, that's the best we could do. I mean, you thought Kendall Browse was a problem. Enos has not been good.
It's shocking that the offensive coordinator you hired, who left another SEC program in the same division as you in the middle of the night without telling anyone goodbye because he didn't have like the man in him to go up as an adult male and tell the coaches, hey, I'm going to take this job instead. I'm shocked that he's not doing well and doesn't garner the respect of his players. Crazy how that works out.
Les Miles would have said he didn't have the chest to lead us. That's a good Les Miles. Certainly. My favorite was always we didn't come away with victory today. It's tough to finish second. Like, finish second, you lost. Shut up. One more game this segment, 11 a.m. Central on ESPN is number 23 LSU. Yes, they're ranked with two losses. They're at number 21 Mizzou. And Marler, they're 6.5-point road favorites. So everybody want to complain about LSU having 2 losses. Why are they ranked? They're the favorite against a ranked team on the road.
Yeah, I mean, listen, even as a Bama guy, that whole thing that Saban did last year made no sense then either, though. Well, we're favored by every team. Well, you're favored by double digits against LSU and by a touchdown or more against Tennessee, and you lost both those games. Vegas isn't in the business of telling you who should win. It's by how many points usually, and they're trying to get like even action on both sides. I can't really like. Something has to give, right? Like, and it's really on LSU, not even in a matchup in this game. LSU's got the 4th best offense in the country, the 117th ranked defense. They have been about as bad as possible on the back end. And I think like 90% of the country, I'm looking at this game and I'm like, yeah, LSU's going to go in there and beat them. But I thought the same thing in 2020. And every single time we doubt Mizzou, and Mizzou hasn't really had the ability to like they don't have a killer instinct at Mizzou. They just don't. Like, couldn't do it against MTSU, couldn't really do it against K-State, even though they won in dramatic fashion, couldn't do it against Memphis, had a 24-7 lead against Vandy, and still weren't able to put your foot on someone's throat. So if they get up early on LSU, you better keep your foot on the gas because nobody's going to stop this LSU offense. They're just not. It's a very, very potent offense. I still think Ole Miss is very lucky. They got to come away with a win last week. But Mizzou, like, you got to get Luther Burden to continue to keep playing well. And I guess the biggest thing for me is like Jaden Daniels is the best quarterback in the SEC right now, but Brady Cook is number 2. And I never thought that's the sentence I would say, but he's been phenomenal all season. So he's got to kind of continue to play mistake-free football. And maybe at some point LSU figures out what they're doing with Harold Perkins.
Yeah. It's mind-boggling, but it is funny though, because all the attention this week, all the focus has been what's wrong with LSU's defense, this and that. What nobody talks about is they fell behind big in that game and came back and took a lead on Ole Miss.
Yeah.
And the offense basically, for a second straight week, they did against Arkansas, they did against Ole Miss. They scored at will every time.
Mhm.
Like, just score, score, score. And for you to say that, LSU has the fourth best offense in the country, like, Les Miles is somewhere hyperventilating because he misses the days of winning games 17-13 where Jordan Jefferson goes for 90 yards. Like, to say that LSU's come this far on offense, it's unbelievable. As good as Joe Burrow was, Jaden Daniels is maybe having the second greatest offensive season ever for an LSU player, and it's marred because they have 2 losses already. So this is where I feel like if you're LSU, go prove it. Go win at Missouri. Missouri's been a great story. It's Brady Cook, Cody Schrader, all those guys. But if you're LSU, you cannot lose this game.
No, you can't.
So I'll take LSU. All right, when we come back with Marler, we will hit on the 2 bigger games going around the SEC here in just a sec. But first, I want to remind you guys this episode is presented to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Look, for all of you guys that are interested in getting in on the action, step into the action, the NFL particularly with FanDuel. They are America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can get that $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, no better time to get in on the action. We're a couple weeks into the NFL season. Of course, college football season still going on. FanDuel's got tons of lines there, tons of SEC games with all the action, and their app, very, very easy to use. Tons of betting options for you, including spreads, player props, over-unders, all that's up there for you. Go visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That'll kick off your NFL season just right with all the great features they got there for you. It is FanDuel. They are the official partner of the NFL. All right, diving back into it with our buddy Chris Marler from the Saturday Football Uncensored podcast. And Marler, we got 2 games of the week. We'll start with number 20, Kentucky at number 1, Georgia. This will be 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. Look, Georgia was about a 14.5-point road favorite against Auburn last week. Georgia's a 14.5-point home favorite over number 20, Kentucky. We saw, it's so funny, 2 different tales of last week. Georgia goes and escapes on the road at Auburn, where Brock Bowers kind of takes over there at the end and gets the go-ahead touchdown. Kentucky just absolutely steamrolled Florida last week. Ray Davis, he was a top 5 rusher in the SEC a year ago at Vanderbilt, but now we're actually paying attention to him because he's at Kentucky. And Kentucky's undefeated. Devin Leary's looked good, hasn't had to do much as of late because that run game's been so good. But, man, what an interesting game of who is Georgia, but really who's Kentucky? It's like, who are these guys if you haven't watched them yet?
Yeah, Kentucky, 5 wins right out of the gate, I think is great. Schedule's very easy. I think they have 124th ranked strength of schedule. One thing is kind of concerning. They were 132nd or 130th, I think. It was 132nd. Going into the game against Florida, they left a game against Florida and only moved up 8 spots in strength of schedule, which is pretty shocking, mainly because of Florida. But no, I think that, like, looking at this game, if you're Kentucky, part of you has to be kind of licking your chops, right? Like, and Kentucky's played Georgia well over the past couple of years. Like, they played them close last year. They played them close. Will Levis had arguably his best game, arguably his best game in college against them. I know, like, from a number standpoint, like, it wasn't like some of the games he had, like, in the bowl game or against Louisville or against Tennessee, but, like, I mean, against that defense, going 2 touchdowns, 0 receptions, all that kind of stuff. They've played really well. And then you just watch Georgia get, like, gashed at times against Auburn. It's a very different type of offense. But if you're coming off a career game for Ray Davis and you just watch Georgia give up, they had the most rushing yards they've allowed since the 2018 loss they had against LSU. So the most in 5 years. And what Auburn chose to do is Auburn just woke up and chose violence and was like, you know what, we're going to run it into the teeth of what has been the best defense in college football over the last, 2+ years and see what happens. They didn't have – like, what's concerning if you're Georgia is you just let Auburn do that. And it's not like Auburn is a triple option team or they're like a very dynamic team on offense or that they're even balanced because they cannot throw the football. It's all they're able to do is run the ball. And you were giving up almost 5 yards a carry. Like, that is scary going up against a Kentucky team.
Any Concerning the other side, Kentucky's defense versus Georgia's offense. We know Brock Bowers has been coming on as of late, back-to-back 100-yard games for him.
Yeah. I mean, like maybe we put somebody on Brock Bowers this weekend. I think that like what's interesting about the way they run this offense is that most everything you do is in 12 personnel where you have multiple tight ends. So it's usually Brock Bowers and Oscar Delp on the field. Now what that does is a lot of times especially with some of the other guys they have at receiver, it leaves Arian Smith, who might be your other most explosive playmaker, on the bench. Like he has not found a role, especially with Ladd McConkey coming back against Auburn. So I wonder what the offense looks like because 12 personnel is great, and Georgia has obviously put up a lot of numbers with Bowers, and the offensive numbers aren't that far from what they did, with Todd Monken. I think Carson Beck has gone completely overlooked for some reason. Like he was 8 of 10 in the fourth quarter last week and 8 of 10 on third downs. I think what it'll be interesting to see this week is what Georgia decides to do is like with their identity, because we've seen Georgia for the last several years, right? And what they tend to do late in games is lean on you and start running, and then they start gashing you in the fourth. Georgia ran 13 total plays in the fourth quarter against Auburn, and 10 of them were passing plays. The only 3 runs they had were for a combined -2 yards. So I think they're going to have to get more than just Brock Bowers involved, but I mean, I don't know. Like, what do you do? Triple team him?
Yeah, I mean, I think you almost have to and challenge those other guys. And I know they're dangerous. I mean, Rara Thomas and all those other guys that they've had. I know they've been banged up here and there. Was it Marcus St. Jack, Roseme, St.
Yeah.
Jack, Roseme?
Yeah. One of my favorite ingredients whenever I reverse sear a steak. It's one of my favorite things.
I mean, they got weapons everywhere. So, but look, I'm going to lean. Look, it's a lot of 14.5. Like, if I have to bet the spread, I think I might lean Kentucky. But I think Georgia wins another close one because they've done that a couple times already this year.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, like I for whatever reason, I keep expecting to break out of this first half lull, and I think that might be something they might be able to do against Kentucky. But we're also going to see Devin Leary go into his first hostile environment because I don't think Kentucky's left the state, have they?
Yeah, I think so. I need to look at their schedule, but yeah, it's been a little bit weaker. And by the way, if we're just going offensive yards per game so far, Georgia 481, Kentucky 396. So a little bit stronger offense there for Georgia. All right, let's get to the big one, the game of the week. It is number 11 Alabama at 4-1 Texas A&M, 2:30 Central on CBS. This is an Iowa, Penn State. Alabama -2.5 on the road in College Station, the place where they lost 2 years ago.
What? What do you want me to say?
2 good defenses. Whatever the over-under is, I'm leaning under.
Without a doubt, I think the under is the play. Bama's defense has been really, really solid. Been really, really solid. I think. Do you want me to give you a prediction? Like part of me wants to give you this long-winded thing, like I always do about every other thing you've ever effing asked me, but I'll just be straight to the point with this with Bama. A&M is the only team in the SEC, and I believe the only team in the country, and I wish I would have taken a picture of this on SEC Final when they posted the stat, but I know it's the only team in the SEC that has scored on their first 2 drives for every single game they've played so far this season. They have come out of the gates really, really well. So when they're on script, especially Petrino in that offense, even with Max Johnson against Arkansas, they were able to score in their first 2 drives in all 5 games they've played so far and get up ahead early. They get to play at home, which they've been obviously a lot better. Their 1 losses on the road. Kind of surprised they're still unranked. Their offense is good. Like they're going to put up points. They've got one of, if not the best receiver in the SEC, one of the best in the country, and Evan Stewart. Anaya Smith has played well. I mean, I said it earlier about Arkansas. Against Arkansas, they scored in every phase of the game last week. That's like a very impressive thing to do in a football game. It's about as good as you can get. They had a punt return for a touchdown, had a pick 6, and obviously they were good on offense. Alabama has not shown that they can play from behind and win a football game, and they haven't had to go on the road except for at USF and Mississippi State. You can say they didn't struggle at Mississippi State, and that's fine. They did struggle against USF. Jalen Milroe, it's taken him a minute to get going, especially in the passing game. I think they only had 5 total passes in the first half against Mississippi State. You're not going to be able to run that kind of offense against A&M. And the thing that concerns me the most with Alabama is I don't know if they're able to play from behind and come from behind with that offense. The offense has been awful. The offense has not put up over 400 yards except for in the first game of the year against MTSU. They've been under 400 yards in their last 4 games. It's the first time they've had 4 straight games under 400 yards since the 2015 season. Very tough to do. They're not putting up a ton of points, especially offensively. They get into a ton of third downs. And I don't know if that offensive line is going to be able to hold up against how physical A&M's defensive line is going to be. So it's October 7th when they play this game on Saturday. And on October 8th, we're going to wake up and Alabama is going to have their second loss and I think probably be out of the playoff hunt.
Here's some crazy stats. Like I'm trying to look for an edge. And look, A&M's offense ranks 6th in the SEC. Bama's 11th, but you can't go with that because Connor Wegman is gone, and he put up a lot of yards and points on Louisiana Monroe and all that. So I dive deeper into the stats, and I see that in terms of how about rushing? Because talked about this the other day. A&M's been better at running the football. Bama's been pretty good at it. They're literally 6th and 7th in the SEC in rushing yards. So like they're neck and neck there. I look at defense and I go, all right, well, what about sacks? A&M's got 20, Bama's got 17. So it's like every statistical category I start to look at with these two is like they're neck and neck. And look, with Wegman gone, Max Johnson's been good, but like really pick it. Who would you rather have in a game, Max Johnson or Jalen Milroe? And then a toss up for most people. Like if you were just being a neutral party, like both have their strengths and weaknesses. So like to me, this really comes down to which defense makes the bigger plays.
Yeah.
The good news is for Bama, this defense has really been playing lights out the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think the defense is going to keep them in this. The matchup I'm most excited for is to watch what Kool-Aid and Terrion Arnold do against Evan Stewart, because that's going to be a really, really good matchup. Terrion Arnold, we're not talking enough about him because Kool-Aid gets all the pub, but he's been phenomenal this year. You said you're looking for an edge, right? And you said the sacks thing. They have the same amount of sacks, right?
20 and 17, close.
Okay. So on the opposite side of that, why not look at the edge if you're trying to find one of which offensive line has allowed the least amount of sacks? Because A&M's allowed 7 all year in 5 games. That's 4th best in the SEC. That's really good. It's actually 3rd best in the SEC. I'm sorry. That's really good. Bama, 13th. They've given up 20 sacks. And here's the thing: the stat that was craziest to me was against USF and Texas. Bama gave up 5 sacks each in both those games. And it's the first time since 2007 season that Alabama had given up back-to-back games of 5 or more sacks. Okay. Since then, it's not like they've righted the ship. They gave up 4 last week, and they gave up 4 against Ole Miss. So I think Milroe, he's got to have to play mistake-free football, and I don't think you're going to be able to run a game plan like you did last week, where you're able to run the football down someone's throat. I just don't see that happening.
The sack stat's a little skewed because with running quarterbacks, when he takes off to run and gets tackled behind the line, it's
throw the ball away.
I know,
he did it twice in the first drive last week.
It's not the end all be all for a running quarterback. Sometimes it might have been a designed run, but he got hit behind the line and it was a sack. Anyway, whatever. So that one's a little bit out there. If you're leaning A&M though, I start to wonder, does Alabama go in and is this their statement win of the season? It would, everybody and their brother, it seems like, they did it against Texas and people were right, but now it feels like everybody's doing the same thing. A&M, this is a great spot for them. But A&M's so good defensively. The run game is much improved. All those weapons they have on wide receiver. I just wonder, is Max Johnson due for a letdown game where he throws 2 bad picks, Bama capitalizes, and they win a close one in College Station? That's where I'm leaning.
Bama will not win this game if they don't win the turnover battle. I will say that for sure. And I tell you what, one of the best players on this team for Alabama has been so far this year is James Burnip, the punter. I never thought I would be saying that. If you're talking about one thing that it could come down to, I'm going to knock on wood because I feel like I'm going to jinx him. Will Reichers hit his last 24 field goals in a row, including his last 10 plus from 40 plus yards. So they've been able to punt and play special teams pretty well. That's all I'm going to say.
Reichert coming back this year has been big for Alabama. Because that was such a big area of concern for so many years with Alabama was making kicks. So he is Chris Marler, the Saturday Football Uncensored podcast. I think I got it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike Breton.
Marler, any closing thoughts?
No, I appreciate you having me on. It's my favorite part of the week, as always. I'm going to go pee. Best of luck to everyone's teams.
All right, thanks. He is Chris Marler there. Appreciate him joining us. That is going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out tomorrow on the show. We will have more getting you ready for SEC Week 6, previewing some of the games, bringing you the latest news around the conference. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Talk to you guys tomorrow.